All right, and then Chris, if you would do the honor of going ahead and sharing the slides, we're gonna go ahead and dive in. Awesome. So we're here today to talk about natural gas as a false solution and what natural gas plans there are right now in Kentucky, specifically around LG&E and KU and what they have in store. And we'll also be talking about other false solutions to climate change, and we'll be talking about real solutions that we can all take part in, and having some specific calls to action at the end. And I'll also say that, y'all, we want this to be a discussion. We know there will be a lot of questions and hopefully a lot of discussion about some specific points as we go through the presentation. So please feel free to unmute yourself if you have something to add in or question about something during this presentation. So feel free to go ahead and chime in. And Chris will be talking as well and talking about our different initiatives that we're talking about. So just to give an overview of who we are, why we're here, and who is hosting this presentation, we are Kentuckians for Energy Democracy. It's a network of organizations from all across Kentucky that's really trying to build a more just and equitable and participatory energy system. So a lot of our work centers around the Public Service Commission, or the PSC, who is the energy regulator in Kentucky, who really is the government agency that's in charge of holding public utilities accountable. And then a lot of our work also involves directly working with the utilities, of course, as well as working with the PSC, again, around utility accountability, because that's who we need to work with to make energy affordable and equitable and clean and safe. So you can see the logos of all the orgs that are involved, and we're also always welcome to other orgs as well. If you're a part of an organization that these values resonate with you, you can let us know, and we can start to have some discussions there. So anyway, this is who we are, and we're really just trying to build a energy democracy together in Kentucky. Next slide. So I'll start with where we are right now. Kentucky is still mostly reliant on fossil fuels. You can see this in this chart. Coal is still contributing to 71% of our electricity. Natural gas is 21%, and renewables are 7.7%. So as the one thing that we've observed in the last few years is that as coal, the piece of that pie, has been receding and going out of favor, because it is such a lot of our coal-fired power plants are up for retirement. It's real expensive to keep up. There's regulations in the future that are really making it difficult to keep up with coal. But a lot of our utilities are choosing to retire their coal-fired power plants and invest in natural gas instead. So that's something that we are going to be diving into a lot today. But that is the trend: is that coal is on the wayside, and natural gas is further increasing. So there's a couple of studies that I wanted to mention that have come out recently, that Kentucky is the worst in the nation for renewable energy growth. We were ranked 38th in energy efficiency. And we have baseload power that's available in other places. So although that we are, fairly behind in where we should be for energy efficiency and for renewable energy, this is the opportunity right now to start investing. We have a lot of low-hanging fruit that we could be using, and we don't need any new fossil fuel investments. Next slide. So another real game-changing development that has really spurred a lot of this conversation is the Inflation Reduction Act. So the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, or IRA, I sometimes call it, is the single largest US investment in climate solutions ever. And it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like it's about inflation and economics, but it's really mostly a climate bill. And so it's supposed to drive the US into a clean energy future, as well as be investing equitably and with this Justice 40 initiative, ensuring that low income and disadvantaged communities are receiving the benefits. But this was a very mixed kind of legislation. In order to get it passed through Congress, of course, it ends up being a mixed bag. So there's some good solutions, there's some bad solutions, and then there's some ugly solutions that we call false climate solutions that we really have to look out for. This Inflation Reduction Act really spurring a lot of that investment into things that are not beneficial for our communities. And I will plug that if you're interested in learning more about the Inflation Reduction Act, we at K4ED are hosting a series of workshops about that. So we have one coming up in Louisville on Thursday. So I would love to see some more people there, and we also are having them across the community and across Kentucky. So I can follow up with more information if you're interested about diving in. But in those workshops, we kind of briefly overview that, like, there's a lot of good solutions. There's a lot of things that we really have the potential to dream about and really think big. The Inflation Reduction Act is almost $400 billion of investment in climate solutions. So that should be good for our communities, right? Well, there's the potential for a lot of solutions that are just going toward corporate profits and things that are not really going to be beneficial to our communities. Next slide. So what is a false solution? False solutions are measures that might reduce greenhouse gas emissions, especially in the short term, such as coal being a very carbon heavy fuel source and natural gas emitting fewer carbon emissions than coal. But these solutions are not embedded in the root causes of climate change, and therefore they're not really going to be really benefiting our communities in the long term, nor are they going to be undoing any historic harms that have been that are really going to be evident once we see more and more climate change impacts. We know that there's a lot of especially technology out there right now that is unproven and untested and even potentially dangerous, that a lot of our Inflation Reduction Act corporate tax credits might be able to go towards. And so we as a community need to be ready for these and aware of them. And that way we can mobilize and organize and stop them once we see them coming. So I've got some examples of some what to look out for in a false solution, but really we need to see, yes, we really are just going to be looking for anything that isn't based in climate justice and moving toward a more democratic and just energy transition. Next slide. So one of these things is GE&E and KU's proposal for 2 new natural gas plants to be built. This is a 3-pronged proposal. One part of this is that they are going to be planning to retire their coal-fired power plants. And then the second prong of this is that they plan to build 2 new natural gas plants to replace those fossil fuels. And although because of Senate Bill 4, they're not allowed to be closing these coal-fired power plants because of federal incentives, we know that this is something that is largely taking into account too. So these Inflation Reduction Act funds potentially are allowing new fossil fuel plants to be built instead of solutions that are going to be lasting in the long term. And there's another component to this proposal at the PSC, the Public Service Commission, who gets to decide whether this proposal is accepted or not. Is there's the DSM, what we call DSM and EE, which is demand side management / energy efficiency. So the demand side management programs and the energy efficiency programs are the ones that could really reduce energy burdens for all and lower the demand for energy that we need in the first place. But of course, with this proposal, those demand side management aspects are actually fairly minimized and not something that LG&E and KU really plans to invest in. I'll also mention that the process that LG&E used to determine the DSM programs that they wanted to invest in, they did convene an advisory group, and that was something that was, again, not very participatory and not very they came in with the solutions that they already wanted and asked essentially for our stamp of approval. And so that's, I don't know if Chris is the one who was mostly involved in that effort, but is there anything you would like to share about that?
Sure, I'll just say that the most frustrating part about the DSM stakeholder advisory process was the fact that once they presented the plan, they didn't have any time built in to process our input or allow for any changes to the plan. And so that, to me, meant that it was a bit of a charade, right? And that we have been tokenized by being asked for approval, but with no process to actually implement our own recommendations. And I also just lift up, this is $1.2 billion. That's just to build the plant. That's a 40-year gas plant, right? Meaning that we're not just locked into $1.2 billion plus profit or return on equity, which is all but guaranteed for the investor-owned utility. That means we'll also be locked in to 40 years or more volatile gas fuel costs, which have been crushing Kentuckians, and they go up and down all the time and are really tied to geopolitical events like the war in Ukraine. So that just sounds like a real bad idea. And I could think of a lot of ways that I would rather spend my $1.2 billion. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, and so there's three aspects to this, and we will be diving into next, I think with the next slide, are two new natural gas plans, not ours, LG&E and KU's, and then our way that would affect us as ratepayers and as community members. So, yeah, as Chris said, they're trying to invest in fossil fuels that would last for 40 years. And these 40-year plants, that is, as Chris said, $1.2 billion that could be invested in other ways in our community. And there's also the potential for them to become stranded assets that then we, again, as ratepayers, are on the hook for paying for, whether they're actually serving us with their electric capacity or not. And so this all goes against the climate goals of PPL, which is LG&E and KU's parent company. It goes against the clean energy goals of Louisville Metro government. And it also goes against, of course, the global climate goals and the recommendations to be weaning off fossil fuels in the next 10 years in order to avoid 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming. So this is really dangerous and something that our community is, if we move forward with this plan, if LG&E is allowed to move forward with this plan by the PSC, we'll be stuck with it for 40 years in the future, whether that's good for our community or not. And it's not, and whether it's serving our community with their energy, or if they eventually decide that other forms of energy are more cost effective and move on to those, we're still going to be stuck with those costs. Next slide. So yeah, one thing I did want to make a little note that we're calling it natural gas because it is the most common term for that. But it also, the term natural gas makes it sound like it's kind of natural or something that's it kind of leads into the idea that it's better than coal, that it's natural. But it's also, it's fossil gas, it's fracked gas, it's fossil fuel. And so I also invite us all to use the terms that we want to use to really call it what it is and what we really mean when we're talking about fossil fuel power plants. We're not talking about, it's not natural as in, good for the earth. It is a fossil fuel. And something else that Chris had just mentioned earlier was there is a major price volatility aspect here, that the price can change due to geopolitical turmoil, as we've seen in Ukraine, that our utilities are able to use what is called a fuel adjustment clause, and adjust and increase prices up to a certain extent when there are global forces at large that are changing the fossil fuel prices, and then we as ratepayers are stuck with that. Whereas in contrast, once we have invested in renewable energy, such as wind and solar, those are producing the energy, and the fuel is natural. That is truly natural. That is free, and we don't have to pay extra for the sun to shine more. We are going. We get free fuel, as opposed to natural gas will continue have to pay into again and again and again, and pay more and more and more as potentially climate impacts are increasing geopolitical turmoil as well. And Chris has a specific example of the fuel adjustment clause causing real impact to residents here in Kentucky.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I have lots of problems with the fuel adjustment clause and the way it's impacts Kentuckians. And I just want to lift up some of those issues before I give the example, right? If the utility isn't required to shoulder the risk of fuel price volatility, and they're just able to pass it on pass it right through to their ratepayers and end users, consumers like us, that means they have no incentive to figure out how to avoid those huge peaks in the fuel costs. So as you all know, when crazy things happen across the world, when Russia invades Ukraine and people stop using natural gas or start using natural gas due to politics, the price gets all over the place. Meanwhile, the cost of sun and wind remains the same, and the impacts of energy efficiency are tremendous. So that's why we want to lift up the potential for investments in our own homes and businesses rather than in fossil fuel plants close by that don't even create as many jobs. But again, getting back to the question of the fuel price volatility, when the price goes up, the fuel adjustment clause goes up. And when people are looking at the rates, they don't think about the fuel adjustment charges. And so when Kentucky Utilities supplies wholesale power to municipal organizations like Olive Hill or Vanceburg Plant Board, they're the ones that are hit hardest by the fuel adjustment clauses. And so a few times over the course of this past year, Kentuckians in different areas across the state have had to pay more than twice their normal rate for their electricity. And Olive Hill is just one of those examples. We're lifting up this example because it increased the monthly bills by almost double. And if you go to YouTube and you Google and you search a little bit, you could even see the city council meeting in which the mayor had to explain the impacts of the fuel adjustment clause to the citizens. And he was saying, look, there's absolutely nothing that we can do about it. And so just to sum it up, if we don't build any more fossil fuel plants We won't have to deal with any more fuel adjustment charges, and we'll have much steadier and predictable fuel costs because renewable fuel costs are zero. Thanks again, Julie.
And you can go ahead and move to the next slide. Yeah, and another issue that really has been a lot of concern for a lot of us who are looking into this issue is that natural gas is not good in cold weather. And, it's really, there's a lot of myth out there that Texas and the winter storms that they had been experiencing and the subsequent blackouts because of the winter storms were because of renewables on the grid. And that is actually entirely a myth. That Texas largely relies on natural gas for power, and it was that natural gas that was causing during the extreme cold people to be disconnected from their utility, and that has also applied elsewhere, even in Kentucky, when we've had blackouts and had people lose connection to their utility during extreme weather. That has largely been because of the volatility of natural gas. And then also the volatility of natural gas, not the price volatility, but the physical volatility of it not being very secure. There's also security risks, both physical and cybersecurity as well. Next slide. And then related to that, there is the potential for leaks and explosions. These 40-year plants that they're planning have a huge potential for leaks and explosions. And we know that there's also the LG&E pipeline that we'll talk about in a bit that also has a lot of potential for leakage. So there's pollution from natural gas also all around the supply chain, from fracking and refineries to natural gas storage, and ultimately the power plants where they're using the natural gas. So every time that there's a leak in that supply chain, it leaks out methane, which is actually 100 times more potent of a greenhouse gas than CO2. So it's actually causing a lot more climate change and a lot more a lot more of the greenhouse gas effect than CO2 is even producing. So when infrastructure is aging, it's even more at risk. So this is a major concern of ours in terms of the leaks, as well as the potential for explosions and real disasters that would affect the people that live around the area, and of course be causing a major ecological disaster as well.
Yeah, I almost forgot about that recent pipeline explosion near Danville. That was about 1.5 miles from my sister-in-law's house. So yeah, that's another example.
Yeah, and then actually even another example, if you go back, I recently learned yesterday about another example from Roger, who's on the call right now, about LG&E's Doe Run facility that was a study about the Doe Run natural gas storage and how much that actually was found to have continued to leak and potentially leak into the atmosphere. Roger, is there anything you want to say about that? Because I was astounded to learn about that just yesterday.
Well, I think the interesting part about that too is that they've known about this since 2005. And they were losing, I think, 295,000 295,000 or actually 295 million cubic feet of natural gas. It was 20% of what they draw from that, and that went up. That was continually going up to it reached 500 million cubic feet of natural gas, and so why did they do something about it before? Anyway, my theory is is that because they want to build these new gas plants, which are going to take a whole lot more gas, and that storage facility, they got 5 of them. That storage facility wouldn't have the capacity, and they wanted to get new capacity through pipeline, and so they've signed a contract with Texas Gas Transmission. So, but anyway, I don't know. It's pretty crazy, and that's right out here, Doe Run, which is right out off of just in Meade County, which is real close to us. And then one of the other ones is the Muldrow, and I think everybody Jefferson County anyway knows where Muldrow is. It's only probably about 30 miles. It's very close to the other one. It's only about 10 miles up the road from it. So, and these are massive storage tanks. But anyway, thank you, Julie. Is that what you wanted to hear?
Yeah, well, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, right. You
terrible
don't want to
news.
hear. Right, exactly.
Yeah, and that just speaks to when we have this infrastructure, we build it, we have to have it around for 40 years to pay it off, but then that infrastructure starts aging, and just like the Doe Run storage facility starts leaking, and if people aren't watching it, it can leak for a long time. And that's it's already been happening here in Louisville, at least. So just another example of it happening right here in our backyards. All right, and so thank you, Roger. And we can't talk about natural gas, of course, without also talking about the other major infrastructure plans that LG&E has about natural gas, and that is the pipeline that they've proposed to build through Bernheim Forest. So of course they want to further invest in fossil fuels by building some pipeline infrastructure in Bullitt County, and the best way that they determined to build that was through Bernheim land in the Cedar Creek Wildlife Corridor, which is of course home to several endangered species. It is a wildlife corridor that is really ecologically valuable to Bernheim and the large forest space that they have. And they've also seized private land from property owners around Bullitt County and through eminent domain. And then talking about the instability of natural gas, they plan to build it on karst ground, which has a huge potential for sinkholes and other ecological disasters. And actually, yet another thing I just heard recently, just today, was there's someone who has been posting on Facebook. There's a sinkhole going right through his own property, through his home, and this is a Kentucky resident who doesn't really live far from where that proposed pipeline is going through. So it's, we like to think that it's not going to affect us or not too close to us, but when it comes to the potential for these disasters, we really need to be careful and really think that this could be happening to us in our backyard, because if we're going to build pipeline infrastructure there, we got to consider those risks. Next slide. So we do luckily have a coalition forming that is out to save Bernheim and stop that LG&E pipeline. And the website for that coalition is savebernheimnow.org. So just to update y'all on that case, the Bullitt County court case is now being appealed. So although the court ruled in favor of LG&E and against Bernheim and the people fighting for the forest, that is being appealed by Bernheim. And additionally, Louisville Metro Council just passed a resolution that was stating essentially that they were opposed to the pipeline as well, and that it went against their clean energy goals and against a lot of the individual property rights that some of those council members value, and again overall against the climate goals of LG&E and the parent company. It's very inconsistent with the PPL's goals as well. So so there's some base building going on in Bullitt County to really gain supporters around there, and talk with the property owners who are going to be affected. And that coalition is that part of the work is being led up by KSEC shout out to KSEC for all the work going on there. And then there was also going to be a fundraiser for that effort. So details will be coming soon on that website, and we can let y'all know, everyone who registered for this, when that's coming up. So it's just like the natural gas plants. This is going to be a very long fight, and although this pipeline did get approved by the PSC in what we call the CPCN case of the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, there's other forces and other permits that they need, that this is continuing to be a fight in the long haul, and we are banding together, just like fighting the power plants. We are banding together and fighting the pipeline too. Next slide. All right, and I want to touch on some other false solutions that we as a community need to look out for, just like how LG&E proposed the natural gas plants and the pipeline, and we as a community have mobilized and are fighting those and trying to get the PSC to not approve them, and ensuring that they don't get built, and that there is public awareness and outcry. We also need to be careful and pay attention to these other false solutions that might be popping up in our communities. And especially with carbon capture, this is something that LG&E is also planning to invest in, and something that we also know is not going to work for us in Kentucky and in our communities. So carbon capture, use, and storage, otherwise known as CCUS, it's dangerous, it's expensive, it's unproven at scale. There is no large or a successful carbon capture, use, and storage facility out there that exists right now. And most importantly, if our utilities are investing in carbon capture and investing in this solution that is yet proven to exist, it is really a distraction from the solutions that we do know and have and know work for our community, like energy efficiency and clean energy. We know those work. We have them available to us right now as a technology, and that's what we should be focusing on instead of our carbon capture investments. So one statistic that I found from the Institution for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis that was shocking was, since 2000, close to 90% of the proposed global carbon capture capacity from utilities across the globe had failed at the implementation stage or were suspended early. So this is, again, not really a solution at scale, and something that that LG&E is planning to invest in, at least in a research capacity. And we know that they are, that is potentially going to be an excuse to keep burning fossil fuels, with the philosophy of we can capture them 10 years down the road and avoid climate catastrophe there. But we know that doesn't work, and it's not something we can rely on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't know if you saw the email that I sent you, but it sounds like you already knew that Cane Run, which is in Jefferson County, has they have a project that I guess they just announced a couple months ago that they were doing for carbon capture. And yeah, it's but they've been investing in it, as the article said, for 20 years. So it's, yet they've not acknowledged that, hardly ever that I know of, that there's even an issue with climate change, yet they've been investing in this for 20 years. So it's just find it so hypocritical.
Yeah. And yeah, I did see your email, Roger. And yeah, it actually, I think another important thing to note is there is a, that carbon capture project that they're planning is, of course, funded primarily by the Department of Energy. It's a almost $6 million grant that they received from the Department of Energy to build that as a false solution for climate change. So that's something, yet again, like there's a huge infusion of federal funding, a lot of it coming from the Department of Energy, but also other various departments that were funded through the Inflation Reduction Act, and that is coming into our community, and our utilities are without hearing from the community or what we want, they are moving ahead and using those funds for these false solutions. So yeah, yet another example that we can fight this and prevent it from happening again. And instead ensure that the Department of Energy funds that are coming into our community are the ones that are solutions that work for us, and relieving energy burdens, and ones that are working toward our needs. So another fossil fuel false solution I thought that I should mention, because this is coming up continually again that we need to look out for, is hydrogen. So hydrogen, there's a few forms of it. There's green hydrogen, there's blue hydrogen, but hydrogen is often seen as a cleaner solution. It's kind of at the cutting edge of technology, really just now developing any possibility of it happening at scale, and yet it is not necessarily a clean energy solution, because especially blue hydrogen is made by burning fossil natural gas. So investing in hydrogen technology will actually again further entrench us in fossil fuels. So although that hydrogen production itself is not a fossil fuel itself, the whole supply chain in order to produce the hydrogen and transport the hydrogen, it all is producing fossil fuels. So that, and even green hydrogen is not an ideal solution for us. So what are the true solutions? So I took these from the Climate Justice Alliance, which is someone in a group that I have been looking to for a lot of guidance on the solutions to look out for, as well as how to create community-driven solutions. And Climate Justice Alliance is a wonderful organization overall, but they have guidance for what are true solutions, and essentially they're guided by principled practice, guided by indigenous knowledge, place-based experience, and public interest science. These solutions need to be intertwined against ecological harm and against social harm at the same time. Replace economies of greed with economies serving ecological and human need. Advance deep, direct, and participatory democracy rooted in local self-determination, and center the leadership and needs of those presently and historically most harmed. So this is, again, with our goals of energy democracy, we want a participatory energy system. We want something that we can have a say in, and something that is working for us for our ecological needs, our social needs, and our human needs. So we need to be advancing those that are just solutions, and something that, again, is something that we as a community want, not something that the privately owned profiteers at the utilities or otherwise are wanting.
And I just have to jump in here, because I
Yes.
think folks might be saying, like, oh, what in the world is out there that could fit into this bucket? This seems like a really tall order. And I agree, it does. But I could just name 3 examples right off the top of my head. Pay as you save, inclusive utility investments, the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, which helps low-income families get weatherization and pays for it out of savings from medical bills. The pay as you save that I mentioned first makes the investments and pays for the investments out of the savings created by the investments. And shoot, I forgot the third one, darn it. But anyway, it's like, these are not pie in the sky investments. There are things out there. Oh, the third one is a virtual power plant. The Brattle Group just did a study that showed you could replace traditional gas peaking plants with what's called virtual power plants, which are controlling thermostats and water heaters and bidirectional chargers and EVs, and using other storage assets, preheating water, pre-cooling homes. So anyway, there are solutions out there, many of them pioneered and implemented in Kentucky, that fit right in this bucket, that benefit us all. And just one final example, in Ouachita, Arkansas, they implemented pay as you save at scale. They implemented helping folks get rooftop solar, and then they had a rate decrease of 4.5% because they saved so much money on their wholesale power costs.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Yeah, we know that there's a lot of solutions out there that are going to be working for us and helping to relieve energy burden and helping specifically low-income Kentuckians and people who have been historically harmed by our energy system in the past. So climate justice centers, organizing, direct action, and then this community-based decision-making, again, this democracy that we want to see in Kentucky in our energy system, by those on the front lines of the crisis who are also at the forefront of change. So that is the vision that we have for a just energy system in Kentucky. And this is something that a lot of us are working toward. But it takes all of us, right? It takes all of us. If we're going to have community-based decision making, it's going to be us who are participating in the process and making our needs and desires known by the people who are the decision makers. So that's why we have the chance right now, actually, to get involved into this one case in particular, and of course get involved in the true solutions that we want. So yeah, you can stay on that slide. So once again, the clean energy can benefit us all. Energy efficiency programs can benefit us all. Stopping utility disconnections can benefit us all, but the way that the system is set up now, it is not fair or just or reasonable, which is supposedly the way that the PSC determines whether these energy projects move forward. So if we continue to invest in these polluting energy systems, we're going to all be paying for it later on, but we can build this better system that works for us, that is the solutions that we know, and solutions that specifically LG&E and KU and all of our utilities that we have in Kentucky could be investing in, such as pay as you save, such as low income weatherization, such as all these other solutions that could also be paid for with these wonderful funds from the Inflation Reduction Act, if they are committed to, and we make them commit to using these for our good solutions and not the false solutions. Next slide. So we right now have the opportunity to speak to the PSC, Public Service Commission, and talk to them about LG&E's and KU's proposal for these 40-year fossil fuel natural gas plants. So we have at K4ED have put together some proposals and demands and ways that anyone can put in a comment and get involved and make your voice heard right now. So we've just, of course, made these as a draft. Anyone who's put in their voice is free to make their voice, put it in your own unique voice, make it focus on what's valuable to you and what you want to see in LG&E and KU's energy grid and the future of how we get our electricity. So, but this is what we have specifically put together as a model to help anyone and everyone get involved. And so I'll put the link to this in the chat as well. It's on our K4ED website under the public comment. And so, but the main thing is, we want the PSC to reject the proposals for these 2 new natural gas plants, but we want them to approve of these coal retirements. We want them to say, look at this proposal from LG&E with a real critical eye, with a thought of all of these risks, all of these negative potential impacts of the natural gas plants, and the risk of having to invest in these for investing $1 billion into them in the future. So, we want them to tell LG&E to invest in something else or go back to the drawing board. And so we want them to specifically approve the solar and storage proposals while pushing for more clean energy resources, of course, with the proper community engagement that LG&E and KU has not had been evident of having in any sort so far. We want them to require LG&E and KU to study whether they can serve customers more affordably or reliably by joining another ISO like PJM. So these are these regional electricity transmission organizations that LG&E and KU has not really had much interest in joining, but those grids on average are cleaner, and also in joining the regional grids, potentially LG&E is able to serve the customers much more reliably. So so this is something that they haven't studied, and we want them to look at as a possibility. And then lastly, go back to the drawing board with their energy efficiency programs, or DSM, demand side management, to say, we have the possibility to really invest in especially with the Inflation Reduction Act funds, invest in the needs of low and moderate income ratepayers, invest in people's alleviating people's energy burdens, and really decrease the demand of energy in the first place, so you maybe don't need to invest in these huge expensive power plants, or at least invest as much in other energy sources. So these are some suggested talking points that you could demand of the PSC on this natural gas plant case. And so we would invite you all to make a public comment. Again, the simple answer is yes to closing coal and no to more fossil fuels. And again, if you go to the public comment page that I put in the chat, k4ed.org/public-comment.html, you can have the chance to really at the bottom of that page put in your comment. And we got some sample ones. We got a lot more resources that you can do as you craft your comment, but we invite you to make your voice heard and participate in our energy system in the way that we can right now through our Public Service Commission. And so join us in our fight for energy democracy. Chris, do you have anything to add about the fossil fuel plants and the comments right now?
Just encourage folks to say it in your comment. Why is this important to me? How does it affect me and my loved ones or my fellow Kentuckians? And then tie it to our comment. And the form that we're linking allows you to do that. And if you're really want to dive into the energy nerd stuff, check out that comment, because we worked really hard on the comment, and we learned from the PSC, right, that when the public asked them to do something, they want to hear those stories, right? But they also want it to be tied to evidence. And so the comment that the coalition, Kentuckians for Energy Democracy, submitted is full of links, direct links to evidence for all of the points that we have made. And all of the suggested talking points are backed up with hard evidence. And so if you want to dive in to the deep end of the energy nerd pool and check out that comment, click on the evidence links, and then come back, right, and speak to the ones that are important to you, the ones that resonated the most with you, like utility disconnections or whatever it may be. But anyway, there's lots of great information in there. So we encourage you to dive in and then be in touch with any questions, be those now or later.
Does anyone have any questions or thoughts before we all leave each other in this space today?
No, just thank you for educating us.
Of course, yeah. We're very happy to have all of you on board, and hope to see you in a future webinar, and hope to see your public comments coming in too. And so thank you all for a wonderful time, and thank you all for joining us today.
Mhm.
And
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Julie.
yes, thank you all. And I did just also put in the chat, if you're interested in our IRA workshops, I can also send that out afterwards, that link. So yeah, thank you all. And I will now stop the recording.
Bye.